Hi, welcome to Middle East in Crisis. I'm your host, Neslihan Erishkin, and let's get started today. This will be the introductory video to a longer series. This one is about the interwar period in the Middle East, in particular 1919, pretty much the year that shaped the Middle East. So we'll be going through just like how the modern Middle East was created in this interwar period and what does that mean today. In these videos, there'll be three main actors. I may elaborate more, but my goal is at least to get Egypt, Turkey, and Iran done, and how they in particular shape the Middle East and how they are representative of the Middle East in this interwar period, as many countries were fighting for their independence from European powers. In the wake of World War I, European powers carved up the fallen Middle East, the fallen Ottoman Empire. Each one took a different approach of shedding their past identity and governance. And in this new era, the changes of governance was not only a change in the political atmosphere of the country, but it actually seeped its way down through almost every single level of society, if not every single level of society. And these changes can still be felt and seen today, not only in those countries, but outside of them. So let's get started with the main culprit of what shaped the Middle East was the partition of the Ottoman Empire, which occurred after World War I, where the Ottoman Empire lost in the war. It was in the Ottoman-German alliance. The partition of the Ottoman Empire was orchestrated by several agreements, mostly secret agreements, kind of like the Sykes-Picot Agreement. These partitions divided the empire, which was the leading Islamic state, not just because of the geopolitical size of it, but also culturally and ideologically. Dominated the Middle East for centuries and broke it apart into all these new states. The partition created the modern Arab states in the Republic of Turkey and giving the borders that we see today. However, the communities of these regions had little voice in saying how they would like the borders to be shaped. So there are like ethnic communities that are broken apart into different countries because of these borders. Like as we know, colonizers didn't take much account in the feelings and the thoughts of the people that they were colonizing, and that can definitely be seen in the borders of the Middle East today. And so this period, this like partition, this colonialization period of the Middle East, lasted from the end of World War I until the end of World War II, when rapid decolonization movements swept through the Middle East. But let's get back to the beginning. So let's focus first at Turkey, just to give you a little taste of what's going to be coming next. In the Turkish territories that formed the Ottoman Empire, the heart of it, in Anatolia, essentially. The partitions were met with the Turkish national movement. The movement was comprised of both the political and military spheres in order to resist European powers trying to colonialize the area. You'll see not just in Turkey, but many countries in the Middle East had strong national movements at this time. And not just the Middle East, but like all over Europe. It was definitely something in the water. So in 1919, the Almayes Agreement laid the foundation of the Turkish national movement to actually call themselves a national movement, and the goal of the agreement was to create this movement to work against the occupying powers. The agreements believed that a national effort and self-determination that would unite the country could free the country and create the independent state of Turkey. The agreement also set up a provisional government, which was called the National Congress. The agreement was signed by Mustafa Kemal, which we'll be hearing about later. He's the founding father of Turkey. Hopefully today, maybe next week, we'll be recording a video about Ataturk or Mustafa Kemal. So this this National Congress was supposed to meet in Seville. So this Congress met in September 1919, where the road of independence was laid by Kemal. The Congress first formalized the representative committee to make a representative government, which was not a new idea in Turkey. A lot of people were like, oh, how revolutionary. It really wasn't. In the end of the Tanzimat period, there was movements to create a representative government and a constitutional monarchy. But the last sultan got rid of that, so they were just kind of re-emplacing like what was already there, which helped them a lot. And I think that's kind of the sentiment of the interwar period, is that actually much of what was there and created was just a continuation of what was already happening before World War I, or the sentiments at least, at times. So this representative committee would later hopefully turn into a government once Turkey was independent. The Congress also disbanded the whole Ottoman government system and as a way to legitimize the new committee, because at the time technically the Ottoman Sultan was still in power, like the Ottomans were in power. They decided to do that as a way to hold on to power. They decided to surrender and kind of become at the mercy of Western powers. But the Turkish national movement was like, oh no, not on our watch. So they disbanded the Ottoman government to legitimize the new committee under Kemal's leadership. This representative committee would later become the Grand National Assembly, which was moved to Ankara, where they established themselves in 1920, which is now the modern-day capital of Turkey. Shocker, it's not Constantinople or Istanbul. So on April 23rd, 1920, the Grand National Assembly named Mustafa Kemal as the first president, Ismail İnönü as Chief General Staff. However, a full independent Turkish national state did not come until November 1st, 1922, which the abolishment of the Ottoman Sultanate. So the Republic of Turkey was later announced in October 29th, 1923, under the leadership of Mustafa Kemal and the authority of the Grand National Assembly. So under Mustafa Kemal, Turkey embarked on dramatic social changes that completely changed the fabric of the country. There was no longer Constantinople was the seat of Islamic power. The city was transformed into Istanbul. That was going to be the star of the Middle East, I guess they wanted it to be. They wanted it to be a vibrant, westernized, secularized city that both was modern and old. And so that's what they wanted to create in the 20th century. Women were liberated, unveiled, and dressed in modern fashions. The language adopted in Latin alphabet. Every citizen was now required to have a last name, which was foreign during the Ottoman period. They didn't have last names. Last names were dictated on like rank and job, kind of. So there'd be like Pasha and Bey. So like technically Mustafa Kemal Pasha was his title. So all these changes were brought by Mustafa Kemal, who ruled with an iron fist. He truly was a totalitarian. No, I wouldn't say, yeah, kind of. He definitely ruled very forcefully, and really just dragged the country into the 20th century. But he wasn't the only leader in the Middle East who forced their country to modernize through a dictatorship. In Iran, there is Reza Shah, who launched a similar wave of reform and modernization program to Mustafa Kemal. Their rise to power was similar, as they both came from a military background, which I'll go on about in my video about Kemal. So Reza Shah was an Iranian officer of the Cossack Brigade who worked his way up until he led the entire Cossack Brigade in 1921. In February, Reza Shah led the entire Cossack Brigade to Tehran and seized the capital. Quickly, he dissolved the government and installed a new prime minister, Zaini al-Din Tabati? Oh God, I hope I pronounced that correctly. With Reza as the commander-in-chief and minister of war of the new government. But 2 years later, there was a Persian coup d'etat, which made Reza Shah the new prime minister with the support of the National Assembly. In 1925, with the support of the Iranian Constitutional Assembly, Reza was appointed as the new legal monarch, in which deposed the last Shah of the Qajar dynasty, Ahmed. So that's where the title Reza Shah comes from. Once Reza Shah took power, he embarked on a controversial plan to unite and modernize the country, similar to Kemal in Turkey. Reza Shah tried to secularize the country and implement Western fashion. Both men tried to create a sense of ethnic nationalism and cultural unity. In Iran, it was called Persianization, while in Turkey it was called Turkification. However, in Iran, Reza Shah modernization reforms failed to modernize the large peasant population, which eventually became the seeds for the Iranian Revolution in 1979. And then our last major player, Egypt. Unlike Iran and Turkey, since it had been under foreign control of the Ottoman, unlike Iran and Turkey, Egypt was under foreign control, Ottoman control. However, this control was waning and at this point kind of fleeting. It was mostly under the control of the British. In 1882, the British took over unofficial control of the province of Egypt from the Ottoman Empire and constituted a de facto protectorate or veiled protectorate. So they pretty much had control of everything except a name. However, the Ottoman Empire, once the Ottoman Empire joined World War I on the side of the Central Powers, the British took formal control of the country in 1914. By 1919, a countrywide revolution was formed against the British occupation of Egypt. This revolution was carried out by members of every level and corner of society. The movement was organized by grassroots level, from the grassroots level, using tactics of guerrilla warfare and civil disobedience, and that worked its way up to nationalistic or nationalism leaders and members of the WAFD party. I'll have a whole video of the WAFD party, who they were and what did they do. They dominated Egyptian power for 50 years. But the movement that changed the revolution was sparked by the British order to exile an Egyptian nationalist leader and a member of the WAFD party, Saglula, after his arrest in March 1919, along with 3 other Wafd leaders, widespread violence broke out throughout the country, leading to the deaths of nearly 800 people, and thousands of people were injured. The revolts continued, which forced the British government to issue a unilateral declaration of Egyptian independence on February 28th, 1922. However, the Egyptian independence was in name only. The British still had strong control over the financial sector, especially like the Suez Canal. So with this somewhat independence, they were able to create their own government, and so they in place Fahd the First as Sultan. He was the 9th leader of Egypt and Sudan from the Muhammad Ali dynasty. So Muhammad Ali is kind of the leader who, like a century before, kind of led the way for Egyptian independence and having Egypt being its own independent state away from the Ottoman Empire. That's why the relationship was so weakened. Much like Iran, Egypt, after the revolution, continued similarly to where they were before. It's practically the same government system, even though technically they didn't have a sultan at the time. It was still the same family who was leading the country. So, but unlike Turkey and Iran, the leadership of Egypt had been there. The leadership and kind of like the political leaders were there before the revolution in power, and then after the revolution in power. The only main change was the name, essentially, and I guess some lightening of British control, but it was still very much under the control of colonialized power, which is definitely going to shape Egypt in the 1950s. So hopefully that is a taste of what the next few videos will be. Until then, have a good day.